Welcome back to the equations unit. Today we're going to be building on part 1 of multi-step equations with part 2. So if you haven't watched that first part, go ahead and do that now. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started right now. Welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing our notes on multiple step equations with part 2 of multiple step equations. If you haven't watched part 1, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, let's get started right now. So here we are at example A, and it says which value of y makes the equation true. So we're going to go ahead and solve this equation by drawing our wall down from our equal sign to begin with. Remember, we have to do inverse operations on both sides. So I've got a fraction and 6y. The 6 is going to be the coefficient because it's right up next to the y, so that leaves 1/2 as my constant. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1/2 from both sides. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because I've got fractions. So I have to remember way back to 4th grade when I was subtracting fractions, and I need to remember that in order to do that, they have to have a common denominator. So in this case, I'm going to have to figure out a common denominator between 3/4 and 1/2. It's not that bad. I'm going to do some side work over here. So 3/4, and I'm going to make that equal to 1/2. So in order to do that, I have to have both denominators to be 4. So luckily, I don't have to do anything to 3/4 in order for that to be 4ths, but I have to multiply the bottom by 2 to get to 4 and multiply the top by 2 to get to 4. So I'm going to have 2/4. So I'm going to be taking 3/4 minus 2/4, which is going to leave me with 1/4. Bring down my 6y, and I've got 6y is equal to 1/4. Now to get rid of that, I need to divide both sides by 6. So I'm going to be dividing both sides by 6, but I can't divide fractions, so I'm going to have to make sure that I multiply by the reciprocal. So multiplying by the reciprocal is 6/1. So now I can multiply across. I can either multiply across first, or I can cross simplify before I begin. I'm going to go ahead and cross simplify. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times. So now I can just multiply straight across. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. And 3/2 is in simplest form, so y equals 3/2. And again, I'm going to circle my answer so I can easily find it on my paper. Hopefully you did this one correct. If not, go ahead and check your work. And then let's go on to the next one. Here we are at practice number 1. It says which value of x makes the equation true. So this one you're going to try on your own. Be careful there of that negative symbol in front of that x. You're still going to have to get rid of that once you move your fraction. So go ahead and try this problem on your own. Pause the video now and then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get the same answer that I got? Notice that you had to get rid of that negative in front of the x by dividing both sides by -1, but you couldn't divide because it was a fraction, so you had to multiply by the reciprocal. You ended up with x equals -2/4, but again, that fraction is not in simplest form, so you had to make sure that your fraction was in simplest form, so you should have had x equals -1/2. Let's go on to the next example. So here we are at example C, and it says solve for x, but obviously we have an n there, so we're going to be solving for n. And we got a large problem with the division sign, and I've got a constant on the outside. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. So I'm going to start by drawing my wall, because I want to make sure that I keep my parts separated. Now, when I have multiple things to do in this equation, I'm going to start with the thing that's the furthest away from the variable, and then I'm going to work towards the variable until I've simplified the problem completely. So that -5 is the furthest thing away, and it's not really affecting the variable, so that's the thing I'm going to move first. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides because the opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. That's going to cancel. 12 plus 5 is 17. I'm going to bring down my n minus 3 divided by 2. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself. Okay, I get rid of the constant now by getting rid of that -3. But the problem is that you can't. You have everything being divided by 2. So that n is being divided by 2, that -3 is being divided by 2, the n minus 3 is being divided by 2. So we can't get to that -3 because the dividing by 2 is in the way. So when we have this particular type of problem, we got to get rid of that dividing 2 first. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. These are going to cancel. Bring down my n minus 3. 2 times 17 is 34. So I'm going to bring down that 34. Again, if you weren't sure what 2 times 17 is, feel free to use your calculator. So now I'm left with just a simple one-step equation, n minus 3. To get rid of that minus, I'm going to add 3 to both sides because that's the inverse operation. Bring down my n. 34 plus 3 is going to be 37. So my answer is going to be n equals 37. Go ahead and make sure that your work looks like mine, and then let's move on to the next practice problem. So here we are at practice problem number 2. This is for you to try on your own. So I want you to go ahead and do the best that you can. Pause the video now, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to figure out the answer is negative 14? Hopefully you did. If not, go ahead and take a look at each of those steps that I did and where my work is different from yours, and go ahead and fix your problem now. That brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will catch you in the next one.